who finances terrorism in Africa, it's a strategy approach company in Africa. Sasa tunajaribu pia kanini
more technical now, we are going to.
Yeah, but the talk is as simple as you're making it. Any comments from anywhere? Standing by.
We are supposed to go there.
Thank you, dear viewer. You are watching your favorite program today, Frontline Africa on Punchline Africa TV. I'm your host, Mwenda Mbijiwe, and I'm joined today by a very lovely and deeply knowledgeable and very effective security consultant working in the Republic of Kenya and the region, Mr. Dennis Nthumbi. Welcome once again.
Thank you very much.
And please, dear viewers, follow us on our Twitter handle and our Facebook page and the numbers that are scrolling at the bottom of your screen. Keep touch with us, share with us your views and comments, and we will be glad to hear from you. Continuing with our guest, Mr. Dennis.
Yes.
Let's look regionally now in Africa. One of the major problems or questions that security experts are grappling with in Africa is where has the funding for terrorists been coming from?
Yes.
Where do they get their financial resources? If I know, Kenya and most of the nations in the East Africa community of nations have legislated laws to curb a transfer or illegal transfer of funds.
Correct.
In fact, in Kenya, you have to prove so much today to receive a substantial amount of money abroad. Where and who is funding terrorism?
Now, the aspect of financing terrorism and terrorism financials is a complicated math. It's a very complicated math because, it comes in various ways. You have what we call two-faced nations. And these are nations who are both good and bad. They, on one line, they say terrorism is not good, but on the other hand, they fund terrorists for various interests, for them to gain regional power and control, for them to gain businesses, for them to untwist other governments into doing whatever that they do. And you also have two-faced people who are, you have to look at the person behind the person, and sometimes the person behind the other person.
Yes.
And their various interests. But it's not just about receiving money, externally. You have people who are, nationals of that country who would fund terrorism for various reasons, both political and many other interests.
Yeah.
And, also businesses that are privately being used to, siphon money in the country. So the concept of financial terrorism is something that the nation has to look at extremely very carefully with, forensic accountants and all that. And this is something we have to ask ourselves, does the DCI or our investigative police, do they have this capability of trying to unearth, financing based on terrorism? Because you require a lot of finances, even in terms of weaponry and any other thing, for you to work effectively as a terrorist and for you to promote your kind of propaganda, And we have within the nation international organizations who are basically working as autonomous, and it would require you to interface with them as per what the law of the land means. So there's so many barriers in terms of you unearthing, unless of course you decide to do it the uncouth way. And what we say to Taunana Kotini,
Yes.
Yeah, but terrorism financing, again, if you look at global terrorism, it's financed by two-faced nations, who they very well know what their interests are by the end of the day. And even stable countries have got, have financed militia groups who have turned to be terrorists.
Correct.
And that information is available online. It's not information that I'm the architect of that information, but I well know as a security expert that you could be fighting, a terrorist organization, and they have nations behind them, or they have very powerful individuals internally against them, or you have communities behind them for various interests.
In the Terrorism Act of 2012 in Kenya, there was created a terrorism compensation fund. The law states that people accused of propagating terrorism or even found to have propagated terrorism, they have bank accounts, they have properties, if found to have involved themselves in terrorism, their property will be seized.
Correct.
And sold, and that fund consolidated in a terrorism consolidation fund, and that can be used to compensate the victims of that particular attack.
Yes.
Going back to Garissa University, for example, that unfortunately followed the Westgate, a lot of children were affected by it, and they have transferred to many universities. Some were given scholarships by nations. You know, I know Croatia, Australia, United States, United Kingdom, Germany gave scholarships to be given to these kids.
Correct.
But many transferred to local universities, but they are still struggling to pay their fees, even though some were shot and, you know, injured seriously.
Yes.
What's the progress, and how far has the Republic of Kenya, if you know, gone in with this terrorism compensation fund? I've never heard about it.
I'm not aware of any property that they've confiscated because it will be in the public domain. I'm not aware of any key person, you know, who has been found culpable of acts of terror. I am completely not aware because that information is not available, and because that you know, it hasn't happened.
Do you think it should be made public?
It should be made public. You know, it should be a name and a shame venture, you know, so that we can know who these people are. And this should be extended to even their 7th generation. You know,
did you say 7th?
Yeah, 7th generation. They should never be able to thrive in this country at all.
Yes,
you know,
because their forefathers involved themselves in terrorism.
Their forefathers involved them in terrorism. They had no interest of the people.
You are speaking like a good Bible reader.
Yeah, I am. But technically, you should. Why should you thrive on the same soil that you poured blood on?
Correct.
You know, but the truth is that this hasn't happened. If you look at Peketoni, a lot of breadwinners were killed because they targeted the men.
Yes.
The women are living in destitute circumstances. They are unable to be compensated. But again, why should we wait to get the money of the terrorist to compensate our people? It's a tragedy and it's a travesty. You know, these people should be compensated by the state and by the communities around them and by the people who really care, and that's the people of Kenya. But the question relies on how then do you find somebody culpable of terrorism? How do we have the capability of unearthing a sponsor who is financing terrorism? Do we have that kind of forensic capability that is within our security forces to unearth that kind of person? Because the guys that we deal with are basically the foot soldiers.
Yeah.
You understand?
The ones that did the job.
Yeah, you know, the
faces behind the faces, behind the faces.
Correct. I almost had you use faces.
Yeah,
and I was almost agreeing with you.
Yeah, it can actually be fisi.
Yeah, it can be faces or the tumbocrats.
The Swahili word for tumbocrats.
Yeah. Yeah, but I doubt whether we have that capability of unearthing that, you know,
does that therefore, Dennis, if I may interrupt you, sir, does that therefore raise the question of putting together a common database, if possible, that is accessible both to the intelligence community and researchers and men like you, consultants, that we are able to trace, you know, that in a certain, you know, terrorist attack, say the 1998 U.S. Embassy bombing in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam, certain people were found to have involved themselves. Those people rented a house in Runda. Who owned the house? Did the owner of the house know he was giving it for that purpose, or the innocent? Can we have a database that every time we need to find out who was behind who, we can, say, all of us be able to access it?
I think we currently have a database, and that database is, of course, of people who've been found culpable.
Yeah.
But those guys are no longer active.
Like you said, foot soldiers.
Yeah, I mean, even big as I'm sure if you look at the CIA of most wanted list and stuff, so those guys, you'll never find them. Or you'll never find them in an act of terror. Because for you to be able to prosecute, then you have to have, you know, a compassionate reason that this person was found engaging in acts of terror. Yeah. But you never found this person with a gun or bombing any institution or even discussing the same. So you just suspect them. And that's what they're put on the watch list. And watch list means we might have adequate information, but we don't have adequate information to prosecute.
Right.
You know,
that's a watch list.
The rest of the other guys will deal them because they'll come with guns to bomb and we'll shoot them down. But these other characters, we don't have any adequate information, and we have to spend millions and hundreds of Kenyan shillings following and listening to them daily. And, you know, it takes almost about 30 officers, you know, to sort of follow one guy.
To follow one guy.
You know,
like what they did to you in Ethiopia, to follow someone, say...
I mean, they have to follow me, what I'm eating, who I'm talking to, manners of how I'm sleeping, my room and stuff of the sort. But you see...
And do a database for a long time.
We need to have the capability to run our analytics well. And the other day I was at a security conference, and the softwares are amazing. Technology.
The one at KSCC?
Yeah.
Yes.
Technology has eased up our trouble when it comes to security operations and intelligence, because these softwares are able to mine even the most hidden and encrypted conversations.
Correct.
And Uncle Sam is very intrusive.
Yes.
Because, for Americans, you might be followed, you might be listened, you might be heard to, and whatever it is. But the Kenyan law sometimes, creates that buffer zone, between persons of interest and thereabout. You understand? Sometimes there's a very thin line between security and human rights.
Yes.
You understand? Security has to be intrusive sometimes, especially when you're trying to mine information.
Correct.
If I want to know Mbijiwe is clean or not, or his money is clean or not, I have to get into your accounts. I have to get into your electronic transactions and all that. You understand?
Yes.
But then you could go to court and say, these guys have violated, my personal space or my rights or my human rights or whatever it is.
But I may never know if they checked on me.
You never know, but if you knew.
But Snowden can tell it one day.
Yes.
Like the US Snowden can.
Correct. But it's because for them, they are, when you get into America, they know the number of times you've gone to the toilet, the phone calls you've made, and everything of the sort. You understand? That's why it's called Uncle Sam. Big Brother watches you 24/7.
Yes.
What they want to do is to profile you. Is this a good guy or not a good guy? You understand?
Yes, sir.
In Kenya, the capability to run our analytics and to sort of profile somebody, we have to do it through, ICT companies or big institutions like Safaricom. The government needs to have that kind of capability. We need to incorporate deep technology within our security operations for us to be able to create, that kind of database, because we are still on analog.
Correct.
To be very honest, we are still on analog. I mean, in the UK, a traffic police officer is able to know just by following you and running your number plate whether you're in the most wanted terrorist list or not, whether you've paid your relevant fees
taxes
and everything, taxes and all that,
yes,
or whether you've qualified for a road test and all that. We're not able to run that. I mean, Nairobi has duplicated even number plates. We have that no capability. We have to automate the security sector. We have to automate because technology can make us so easy.
Can help us.
And it will make it cheap for us to operate.
Dennis, while you're on that point, do we therefore need to create a joint, say, coordination and operations center?
Yes.
Where all the agencies fighting terrorism, say the National Counterterrorism Center, the DCI, the
Correct.
Director of Criminal Intelligence,
yes,
and any other agency, the special forces in the military, a joint operation center where we can coordinate all these operations,
yes,
the surveillances, the eavesdropping, the
Correct.
Uncle Sam listening thing like you're saying. Do we need to create, or is there such a need for African nations? Talk to Africa, because Africa is listening today.
Yes. I think that is not a question of if we need. We needed this 20 years ago. We needed this 20 years ago. Kenya, we are still where we deploy sort of reactive kind of security. But coming back to your question is that this is absolutely prudent. And, at the command level, because, security has 3 levels when you're operating it. You have the strategic level, which are those think tanks and the guys who formulate the concepts going on the ground. You have the operational level, and this is a command level, and you have the tactical level, which these are, soldiers on the ground, our first line kind of response, which we need to, sort of integrate it with the community. But at the strategic level, we need a joint we need a joint operation.
Joint operation.
And that joint operation, for me, if you ask me, needs to come from Africa-wide, because terrorism is global. They operate, globally. If you look at the caliphate, the caliphate is a global joint exercise. If you look at the declarations towards Africa, they're saying they'll get to Kenya, and they call the Kenya Great Lakes. If you look, it's available on the CIA website. The Al-Qaeda plan that was being executed, and that is what we're seeing in Syria and thereabout. And those are the same guys who could be coming down down here. So we have to have that joint exercise from the strategic level, and then break down operations to country level. And then on the tactical level, we have to go to the machinery. We have to enforce. You see, there's a lot of police stations that are being attacked now. They have no, police forces are being forced to deal with military circumstances.
Yes.
You know, yet they are not even capacitated
not
to deal with the standard
militarized. Yes.
police work. You understand? So but you know, when you're operating security, you don't start from the top.
Yes.
You start your concept from machinery, and then you build it.
You build it up
all the way up. But a joint exercise is very prudent. It will help us, you know, properly mine information, look at Africa as a wide,
yes,
then look as a country as an operating unit, and devolve that all the way to the county level.
I would like you to talk to the nations of Southern Africa, the SADC community of nations.
Yes.
And Tanzania could also be, it's not part of SADC, but, you know, it's by there because terrorism from Tanzania, you know, ceases to be.
Yes.
Zambia, Malawi, nations of Mozambique, across to Angola, Botswana, South Africa, Swaziland, and all those nations, Zimbabwe, they don't have a terrorism problem.
Yes.
My deepest fear is when terrorism gets there, they could be slipping. What should the African nations of the southern of Africa do in preparation or in curtailing terrorism? Or what do you know? Maybe there are cells, there are sleeper cells that we don't know about. You're the expert.
You know, the biggest thing about the caliphate is something that they call Dar es Salaam. And that is a country that has already been beaten into submission of terrorism. Then there shall be no terrorism available. And the reason why terrorists come is to submit you to a particular cause. So we need to ask ourselves, is that nation submitted or not? If you look at Nigeria, is Nigeria submitted to terrorism or not? Or it has aspects that terrorism hits and stuff of the sort. But the biggest question is that they have to start learning from countries that have suffered. Actually, the strongest countries are countries that have suffered from terrorism.
Yes.
You understand? It's not a country that hasn't suffered from terrorism, because no country is immune to terrorism. Your current situation doesn't dictate that it will go like that for life. Environment changes across the years based on international interest, religious interest, and all these things. And I think it's up to us to teach those nations what to do and to work with them. Because any instability around us, any growth of terrorism cells, because if quiet nations means there's a capability of those terrorists working in their sleeper cells and watching us.
Yes.
So we should get to those nations and work with them and say, hello, are those guys sleeping in there or in here or what? Or can we run a joint exercise? Can you allow us to work with you? And because my question is normally, when we got our boots into Somalia and when other countries, and you know now there's a joint venture, you know, led by the US and all that, where did those guys run to? They ran to some of those quiet countries.
They surely ran into some of the regional nations.
They ran into and they're living quietly with their families, but they're operating within there. Yes. Because those countries don't suspect such kind of information. You understand? And of course, the terrorist is not foolish to destabilize every country in Africa because they won't leave. You know, they want those very quiet countries. Some of the areas that are submitted to their cause and all that. You know, there are still segments of Somalia that are under Sharia law. You know, under the Islamic Court, whatever, organizations and all that. So we have to work with each and every country in Africa and conquer terrorism African-wide.
Maybe in about 30 seconds, Dennis, staying on the line of working with every country in Africa.
Yes.
The African Union has not effectively put up a counterterrorism strategy or maybe a roadmap for the nations in Africa.
Correct.
What should the African nations, you know, or how, I would like you to emphasize that point, how can we have a common approach to fighting terrorism? African nations.
Until perhaps we have some of those characters to step down from presidency. You know, not everybody has the interest of curbing terrorism in Africa.
Correct. Because
some of those guys thrive through, you know, organized crime. To be very honest, that's how they're able to fleece their countries. We can't say because it's Africa Union, everybody has the interest of, some of those guys even work for terrorists. Who's funding them? Who's funding the operations and all that? But the point is that AU has to have a strategic approach in terms of stabilizing Africa.
Right.
And one of the tools used to destabilize nations is the aspect of terrorism. And thereabout, it's an organized crime that is used to siphon money, bend nations, and, you know, articulate power to what they want. But, you know, the AU, first of all, needs to work on its own.
Yep.
You know, technically, it needs to be pro-Africa.
Pro-Africa.
You know, sort of when you look at AU, you sort of know there's a Muppet hand somewhere pulling their strings. They're not autonomous. You know, and we honestly need to be absolutely Pan-African. We have to, and I'm aware that AU has a very, very strong security unit and a very, very strong security approach. But I doubt if they drive policy based on how AU should see Africa 20 years from 20 today. Years.
Maybe they lack the political goodwill of Africa.
It's a political goodwill, as you said, and it's what I was saying earlier. There's no political goodwill to kick terrorism
out of Africa.
Out of Africa.
Hey, Dennis, yes. I am so glad that you came.
Thank you very
viewers,
much,
we were joined today by Dennis Nthumbi. He's a security consultant based in Kenya. He runs a security firm that manages a lot of executive security. And I am sure you have learned and heard from this dear brother and consultant. And I would like, and we would like to hear from you at Punchline Africa TV. Please write to us, comments, opinions. And if there's anything to criticize, please feel free to do that. The Twitter handle and the Facebook page and our contacts are at the bottom of your screen right now. And this has been your most favorite program, the Frontline Africa. We will be back very, very soon, and it's been a pleasure hosting you today. My name is Mwenda Mbijiwe. In closing, I will ask that Africa pays attention to the security of its people, like our consultant said, and we should have a strategic approach to fighting terrorism in Africa. Thank you, goodbye, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thanks, bro.
Thank you, bro.